What is culture? That is a huge question with a lot of different answers, but here we're going to talk about culture in terms of an analogy. Culture is like an iceberg. Now, we're not the first ones to come up with this idea. Edward T. Hall in 1976 wrote about the iceberg model of culture because he noticed similarities between icebergs and the way cultures work. First of all, an iceberg has a part that floats above the water that's visible, and cultures also have a visible part to them. The visible part is also a conscious part. It's also an external part of culture. It's the side of culture that you can see and that you're aware of. There's also an invisible part of the iceberg. It's under the water. It's the part you don't see. And that's true for culture too. There are invisible parts of culture that are out of our consciousness. They're subconscious. They're also internal. So the cultural iceberg has a tiny part actually that's visible and a very large part that's invisible or underneath the surface and out of our consciousness. And actually, it's the hidden part, it's the invisible part that causes more problems than the visible part. And we're going to see how that works. So, another way to look at it is that cultures are made up of products. In French, that's produit. And those are things, nouns. They may be tangible or intangible. So it could be something like a game or a table or something that you can touch. It can also be something like a law or a system, a school system, for example. Practices are also something that you can see. In French, that's pratique. Those are actions. They're often expressed with verbs, things that people do, sometimes things that people do with the products. Underneath it all, we have perspectives. And in French, that's perspective. It's the same spelling. Those are values, beliefs, things we hold down deep. They're often expressed with something like it is important to. Let's take a look at an example. This is a produit, a product. Another way to think of products or produit is by the questions that they answer. If it answers the question, what, it's probably a product, a produit. In French, qu'est-ce que c'est? What is it? Qu'est-ce que c'est? And qu'est-ce que c'est? What is that? It's un guessing. Okay, that doesn't help you much, does it? So let's take a look at how it's used.
So cool.
Okay, so now you can see that guessing is an instrument. It's a musical instrument, a percussion instrument. And you can see that thanks to the pratique, the practice, right? The pratique. A pratique answers different questions like who, where, when, and how, with whom, not who, not when, not where, not how, and so on. In French, those questions are qui, où, quand, and comment. Okay? The bigger question then becomes the perspective. That answers the question why. In French, pourquoi. Pourquoi? What is the value? What is the belief? What are the reasons for this musical instrument and the way it's played and so on? Usually we have to do a little research to figure this out because remember, it's invisible, it's under the surface. So after talking with a friend of mine from Senegal, this is an instrument in Senegal, which is a country in West Africa, and after doing a little research online, I found out that entertainment is very important in Senegalese culture because traditional animist religions in Senegal hold that people must entertain the gods in order to gain their favor. So, dancing, singing, percussion, theatrics, and storytelling are all ways to make the gods laugh and get them to send rain or fish or other forms of prosperity. The griot, like this picture of the man at the left, is the professional entertainer in the community. There's a job to be an entertainer, and this person is revered for his or her talents. It can be either a man or a woman. The value placed on entertainment today in Senegalese culture has its roots in these animist beliefs, traditional religious beliefs, and in the admiration of the griot. Interesting, right? Let's look at one closer to home. Produit, qu'est-ce que c'est? Well, you can see right away that's Walmart, right? And that's a parking lot. It's a Walmart parking lot, and that is a cultural product. What does that tell us about pratique, about how people use it or who uses it and when and how and so on? Well, we need big parking lots at Walmart because in the US, people are going to drive there for the most part. Most of the time, individual people will get in their individual cars and drive individually to Walmart, get what they want, get back in their cars, and leave. It's not nearly as common in the US for people to take a bus or other forms of public transportation to get to Walmart. Therefore, Walmart has to have a huge parking lot. And a lot of times, the huge parking lot is just on one level. It's okay to use up that much space in pavement in the US. And we can see that individuals are tied to our cars. In fact, in many families, every single driver in the family will have his or her own car. So, what does that tell us about the perspective? Why do we do that? Well, individual rights and time efficiency are extremely important in the US. Most people want to be able to drive themselves on their own time frame wherever they want to go. They don't want to wait, which they would have to do for public transportation, and they don't want to walk because they want to save time and they want to save energy. And that's more important than saving other things like fuel or the environment from the pavement that it takes to make parking lots. Let's look at another one from the US. Qu'est-ce que c'est? Obviously, chicken McNuggets and fries, right? That's an interesting product because it has a specific audience. While anybody in the US might be interested in eating chicken McNuggets and fries, it's specifically a children's food, right? So the practice, the who would be children and adults too, but it's specifically considered to be something that children would like. In the US, we have the idea that some foods are child friendly and some foods aren't. So, for example, chicken McNuggets is child friendly, but broccoli is not. Pourquoi? Where do we get this idea that some foods are child friendly and some foods are not? Well, I'm going to propose that it's because in the US, childhood is considered to be a magical and protected time when children should be insulated from adult responsibilities like eating a wide variety of foods or prioritizing health. Childhood should be carefree, and children should be allowed to choose what they want to do. Some adults even prefer to suspend adulthood and continue the carefree lifestyle of childhood. That's one of the great successes of Disney World, for example, that adults and children alike like to be children, right? So perspectives are kind of tough to get a hold of because remember, they're under the surface and they're invisible. And every culture has perspectives. They're just not always the same perspectives. In the article 13 Values Americans Live by Coles, and this is a dated article, 1984, Coles outlines the 13 values that he believes govern US culture. Now, he makes a fundamental mistake in thinking that US culture is monolithic, that there's only one US culture. Absolutely not. So he's really focused on one subculture in the US, which would be the majority subculture, the culture that has sort of defined um, the US in terms of its government and so on. Nonetheless, the values that he lists are interesting ones, even if they aren't the values of every subculture in the US. They are interesting. It's an interesting point of departure. I must say that he makes another fundamental error in thinking that these are the standard values and everything else deviates from them. That's actually not true. All values, the whole range of values that cultures can have, are a range of values. There's no one that's the standard and everything else is measured against that. So this is just an issue of having published his article in 1984 when people thought more like that. But I believe his thoughts are really interesting, and you can see his values over here. This is going to help us understand perspectives and some other perspectives that we might be seeing in other subcultures or other cultures around the world. So let's try it ourselves in terms of determining what is a product and what's a practice and what's a perspective. Here's some examples. A drive-through, eating school lunches and courses, a baguette, quality is worth the price, time should not be wasted, a school cafeteria menu, peanut butter, buying bread every day, eating breakfast in the car, and being frugal with money is admirable. I want you to stop the video and take a minute to decide which items are products, things, nouns, tangible or intangible. Which of those items are practices? They're the verbs, they're the actions, the things that people do. And which ones are the perspectives, the why underneath it all? So do your categories and then we'll look at what was intended. Okay, did you agree with this categorization? A drive-through peanut butter, a school cafeteria menu, a baguette, those are all things, right? Those are all products. Eating school lunches and courses, buying bread every day, eating breakfast in the car, those are things that people do. Those are practices. And being frugal with money is admirable, quality is worth the price, time should not be wasted. Those are values that people hold, and those are perspectives underneath it all. Now, these don't all come from the same culture. If you look at these different items, which ones would you say are probably more related to a US culture than a French culture? And which ones are more related to French culture than US culture? And which ones are halfway in between both cultures? Okay? Take a second to decide. All right, so there are drive-throughs in the US and in France, but it's more of a US cultural product. Peanut butter, the same way, exists in both cultures, but it's more of a US product. A school cafeteria menu actually spans both cultures, but they tend to look different. A baguette is more a French culture item, a French cultural product, even though we have baguettes in the US too. Eating school culture is eating school cultures. Eating school lunches and courses is more of a French practice. Buying bread every day is more of a French practice. Eating breakfast in the car, much more of a US practice. Being frugal with money is admirable is more of a US value. Quality is worth the price, more of a French value. And time should not be wasted, more of a US value, although both exist in both cultures. So, what is cultural? Is this cultural? Absolutely. You can pick out products, practices, and perspectives related to this photograph. What about this? Is this cultural? For sure. Lots of products and then practices involved in those products and perspectives that underlie them right in that photograph. And this, absolutely. So now we know that this semester we're going to be working with culture as products, practices, and perspectives.